Welcome to all of you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining our Be Women weekly webinar to connect, to share, to learn what is important in these kind of challenging times, in these moments of isolation but it's actually a unique opportunity for all of us to reimagine our future, not only personally, but also professionally and as a global citizen. What do we stand for? And I'm Laura Giadorou, Koch, founder of Be Women, lawyer in the state of New York and Argentina, and truly passionate about the movement of using business as a force for good. The workshop of today is approximately 70 minutes and will be amazing. Steve is our as a coach today, and he is co-author, Steve Hecht, is co-author of Nonflict, The Art of Everyday Peacemaking. It's an incredibly effective tool that transforms conflict into an opportunity for growth. What better than that? Because we all have conflict, and we call it transform conflict into nonflict. So Steve, this is pretty awesome, so thank you. So I read this book more than 5 years ago, and as soon as I read it, I said, I must put it into practice. I put into practice with my 2 boys, teenage boys, then with my husband, now 30 years marriage, and also in my business. And I wish, Steve, that you would have written this book maybe 30 years ago. It would have been amazing. Steve has, in the last year, Nonflict has really expanded its wings because we have trained more than 250,000 people, and the Pope has invited Steve twice to the Vatican to share about Nonflict and about how can Nonflict be incorporated in a religious setting. So if you know Steve, he's for more than 30 years he has been very successful entrepreneur. He's a recipient of the Canada Award for Best Business Excellence and presented by the Prime Minister of Canada. He's CEO now of a Million Peacemaker, a non-for-profit organization. And before we start the presentation, I just want to share a few seconds more about who are we, Be Women, because I see a lot of new faces. We are a global network of women entrepreneurs that seek to balance purpose and profits in the market towards a caring economy, an economic system that genuinely cares for people and nature as its top priority, where values, respect, collaboration are the driving force. A few seconds more, Steve, before you start. I want to share the Be Women empowering pose that is very important so that we get energized during this call is put your shoulders back, your chin up, your eyes that twinkle with the joy and determination, and with a super wide smile. Steve, the call is all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. What a wonderful introduction that is. And Laura is an incredible champion. I met her first at her home. I was going to New York and I had a free evening, and I asked a YPO champion, the regional chair, if there's one person in New York I have to meet, who should it be? And he said, you have to meet Laura Koch. So I sent her an email and she said, come on over. I'm hosting an event tonight at my home for another charity. And I went there and we ended up connecting and then having breakfast the next morning. And here you are, leader of our US nonprofit and on the board of the Canadian International Nonprofit. So thank you, Laura, for organizing this, and for you for building this incredible group of women who are out to make impact. And when it comes to peacemaking, women are the ultimate peacemakers. And it's actually women that inspired me to leave my career in real estate to do this and pursue this full time in order to be a better role model to my children and to leave a legacy which I thought would be more important than just building another shopping center. So thank you again for having me, and for all of you for joining us today. We live in interesting times, and unfortunately, when we're confined in homes as we are, it's a little unusual for us, and there's a lot of conflict out there. We're hearing reports of increase in domestic violence, increase in divorce rate, and we're not used to being together 24/7, and the conflicts that might have been avoided in the past, now we can't avoid them anymore. It's a lot harder to, and if we don't have the tools to deal with them constructively, then we're ultimately going to potentially have some destructive conflicts. So the purpose of today is to give ourselves and learn some of these tools to deal with conflict in a better way. So if you allow me to share screen, Laura. There we go. There we go. Give me a second. This is meant to be an interactive session, so please use the chat button. I'm going to be asking questions throughout to this. It's meant to be very interactive. I know given the challenges of Zoom sometimes, it's not ideal, but we could get a lot of interaction. We're also going to be using some polls and breakout rooms to allow for greater interaction. I'd like you to reflect on a conflict or conflicts that you might have from time to time and that you might be in right now. And we all have them. And think of the feelings that you have when you have these conflicts, when you're engaged in a conflict. How do you feel when you're in conflict? And please put in the chat button some of the feelings. Here's a feeling board that might help you with some ideas on different feelings. You have an inner ring and then an outer ring over here. So please use your chat button and type feelings that you have when you're in conflict. Awesome. So we've got, there we go, anxious, upset. Andrea is sad. Rod, anxious. Robert, nervous, frightened, scared, emotionally draining, aggravated, torn, agitated, nostalgic. Interesting. Andrea, Vineet, and mostly was conflict worth it, disappointed. Lindsay, agitated, disconnected. Anger, sad, exposed, missing hugs. Yes, we're missing those hugs now. Disappointed and aggravated. So we see conflict is very emotional. There's anger, disappointment, a lot of that. And it's just not us animals, us human animals. Certainly we see conflict amongst other animals as well. If you had to define conflict, what is the definition of conflict? If you ask, what is the meaning? What is conflict? Put that in the chat as well. Different opinions, okay. No harmony, different history and interest, different views of what's right. Disagreement, different perspectives, fighting, different points of view. Depends if it's internal or external. Yes, we all have internal, external conflicts. Marissa, okay. So there's conflict. Yeah, really looking at a theme together. Thanks, Robert. Tension. So if you look up conflict in the dictionary, depending on what dictionary is communication, you look in, it's different. So there's conflict over the definition of conflict. So we came up with our own, which is when two or more different perspectives come into contact with each other. So is that glass half full or half empty? Here it is. In my, by the way, I'm married 28 years, but with 3 wives. So I've had a fair amount of conflict. I'm happily married my 3rd time with my wife, Naomi. With my 2nd wife, the glass was always half empty. With me, it was half full. So we had a lot of conflict. But when you look at that definition, conflict is neither a positive or a negative. It's how we deal with it. It's either going to be constructive or destructive. Because we need 2 or more different perspectives in order to have innovation and growth. As individuals, as organizations, many of you are entrepreneurs or in companies, or geopolitically, we need positive conflict in order to grow. One of the important skills that we could use every day, and often we don't, is active listening. And this is nothing new. I taught active listening back in 1978 at McGill in organizational behavior. And even though many of us know what it is, we don't always use it. And thanks, Marissa, conflict is a natural part of life. That's very true. We all have conflict, internal and external. So active listening. Eye contact is an important component. If someone's not looking at you in the eyes when you're talking to them, they're avoiding, looking away. How do you feel? Put that in the chat. How do you feel if someone's not looking at you when you're talking to them? Mistrust, disconnected. They're not paying attention. They're not truthful. Can I trust them? Thanks, Doris. Not recognized, uneasy, depends on their culture, and that's a good point. Direct eye contact in certain cultures is seen as a form of aggression. So talking gentle eye contact in those cultures, you look in the third eye. So alone, avoiding, and also, yes, not interested in what I'm saying, not sincere. So someone's just looking away at you when you're talking. They're looking at their phone, which are buzzing. How do you feel? Probably not ideal. And you might feel disrespected, and feeling disrespected, and this is an important point, feeling disrespected is a source of 90% or more of the conflicts out there. Think about that. Think of when you are in conflict with someone. How do you feel when they don't look at you? And we're talking as gentle eye contact versus angry eye contact. Thanks, Andrea. All right, we're talking gentle eye contact. Another component is being able to hear them. So if we're in a loud restaurant, which isn't the case these days with no restaurant open, but if you're in a loud environment, it's hard to hear them. The TV's on, the radio's on, you're getting WhatsApp beeps every minute. Another thing is to have an open mind. Often when we're in conflict, we have a closed mind with the other person that we're in conflict with. We're so focused on our point of view that we're in the right, that we're not open to someone else's point of view. And finally, to have an open heart. That the other person has emotions too and has feelings too, and maybe to have empathy for them. Now, by listening to them, it doesn't mean that you're giving up on your point of view. By just giving them the respect and courtesy of listening to them is enough to diffuse many, if not most, conflicts out there. So if there's one piece of take-home value you've already gotten, practice active listening. And mirroring. So mirroring here is body language, which is easier when you're in person. You see great politicians mirror body language. And we're going to practice it now, where we're going to share a negative or positive aspect about the impact of COVID in your life, including facts and feelings. And I'm going to share it for about 1 minute, and I'll demonstrate it with Laura. I'm going to share facts and feelings, something negative and positive about the impact of COVID on your life. And then Laura is going to mirror the essence of what I've said, not like a parrot. So anyone could repeat back often like a parrot, like a tape recorder, but to use your own words, Laura, and when you're going to be doing it in breakout rooms soon, to use your own words and just mirror the essence. It could be in 1 or 2 sentences after I talk for a minute, and then ask, did I understand you well? Because we all have our own lens of hearing and interpreting, and it's good to get clarification if you understood me well, okay, or if we understood each other well. All right, so let's try that out. So Laura, I'm going to unmute you, or you are now unmuted. There we go. So why don't we try that? You and I don't know if people could see us in the front, and we're going to give it a go. So something negative and positive about the impact of COVID in my life. Let me think. So the negative is my wife, Naomi, has a autoimmune disease. And a year ago, she was in the hospital, and she's had a great recovery, but she still has the disease. And she therefore is in the high risk group. And therefore, she can't afford to get it, and I can't afford to get it. So we're secluded in our cabin, and we're very lucky to be here. But I figure if we're going to be here till there's a vaccine, it might be a year or two So that's the negative. We can't see our kids. We have 7 kids between us, and so there's certainly, it's not ideal. How do I feel about that? I've kind of come to accept it. I don't know if I've really acknowledged it or what it's going to be like a year or two not seeing people physically other than my wife, but that is, and luckily we're using a lot of Zoom meetings and Zoom connection. So the positive is I am connecting via Zoom with family members on a more regular basis than I ever did before. So we had a family Passover Seder a few weeks ago with Zoom, and we had 39 members from around the world that we never would have gotten in touch with. And we have a lot, and from a business perspective, million peacemakers, we have the ability now to connect with people in a virtual way as we're doing now. So there are some positives, and I'm trying to focus on those positives, that glass half full, but sometimes, it is a little challenging, and also to keep my wife's spirits up because she's very much a people person.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. So to mirror the essence of what you said, in summary, the facts and feelings are, you are now in a, like everybody is in isolation, but your situation is that your wife Naomi is a high risk group. So this means that you might have to stay more than a year in seclusion without seeing your family or your kids. So you are accepting this challenge. That's how you're feeling. You're seeing the positives that also that you're connecting with all your family. So you are balancing in a beautiful way the negatives and the positive, but I think the positives are coming through because the vaccine is soon to be. So did I understand you well?
You did. Thank you. Thanks, Laura. So what we're going to do now is go into breakout rooms where you're going to share for about 1 minute your negatives and positives, including your feelings, with someone else that the power of the Zoom computer is going to choose at random. Have your video, your cameras on, so you can make eye contact with each other virtually. And the person with the longest hair go first, share it with the person with the shorter hair, and then switch over. So it's going to be a 5-minute session, and then you'll all come back here, okay? So Laura, whenever you're ready to launch the rooms, you'll automatically be going into these breakout rooms, and let the computer bring you back, okay? So when you're done, let the system bring you back to the main room over here. And by the way, what is shared in breakout rooms is confidential. So that's very important. Whatever you share in the breakout room is confidential and is meant to be stayed in the room, and it's not being recorded. So the breakout room meetings are not being recorded, and feel free to be open and maybe give.
Oh, Steve.
Okay, great. They're just adding quickly. I think we're coming to everyone being back. So welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice visit with a new friend to be, or a new friend. Yes, you could have had more time. Certainly, once people get to start connecting, you could be there for an hour, and feel free to take the coordinates of the person that you were with after. You'll remember their name, and to continue the friendship and the collaboration. So any insights that you'd like to share, please put it in the chat button. How was that? experience. Hella said, great, with a smile. And what was great about it? Felt connected. Thanks, Andrea. Nice, refreshed. We laughed. Cool. We all need laughing these days. Open to sharing. Wonderful. One of us could not share due to the time. Energetic exchange and emphatic exchange. So we have empathy. Great. Felt good to get personal. Awesome. Thank you. So when we take the time to really listen to each other, you can see that we have a lot in common with each other. Lindsay just said, we're in this together. We're all in the same boat. And think of that. We're all in this boat together. Everyone in the world. We have so much in common with this challenge, this global challenge that we have. And the negatives and positives are tied. That's interesting. Yeah, that glass half full or half empty analogy we talked about earlier. Let me go back to sharing screen. So it's powerful when we take the time to share with each other and connect with each other. And what a great opportunity we have now that we're in the same room with people, or we could connect virtually to be able to do that. And this technology we didn't have a few years ago. Framing is something to keep in mind when we are connecting and when we're in conflict. We all have different personalities. We all have different life experience that affects how we view the world, right? Even if we're in the same family, we're different. All 7.2 billion people in the world are different. And often when we're in conflict, we wonder, why don't they see it our way? And we often get emotional. Why don't they see it our way? It's because they have different framing than we do. How we were brought up, how our parents dealt with conflict often impacts how we deal with conflict. So one way of dealing with conflict is to flee from it. So using the chat button to avoid conflict, what are the pros and cons of fleeing from conflict? Never gets resolved, unresolved. The pro is you don't have to deal with it now. Space to reflect before acting, and that's important. Sometimes to take time to reflect on it before acting on it and engaging in it is a good thing, especially when it's a very emotional conflict. But never getting to it, the pro is you're not fighting, gets putrid. Okay, no solution, more time could help to calm down. Yes, that is true. But it builds up, as Nirita is saying, and it could increase stress, as Rod is saying. And ultimately, you avoid until you may blow up and say things that maybe you didn't mean to say. And you're not solving, thank you, Maria, the issue at hand, the issue at stake by avoiding it. Another way of dealing with conflict is using force or power. Do it my way or else I'll fire you in a company, or I'll quit, or I'll leave you, ultimately, or in some cases, I'll shoot you or nuke you, depending on the level of conflict. All kinds of force. It doesn't have to be physical force, it could be emotional force. So what are the pros and cons of dealing with force? We're using force to deal with conflict. Doesn't resolve the conflict. There's a winner and a loser. Always a loser. Yes, by definition, there's a winner and a loser. The pro is it is quick. If you have more power, it is quick, or if the other person does. Someone feels minimized. So if you had a boss who's always using force on you, you're maybe not going to be resentful. or if your spouse partner is always using force. Yeah, great. And by the way, there might be a time for force or power. If the building is burning down, you're going to use force to get everyone out to safety. So there's a time and place for all of these. And thanks for that quote, an eye for an eye and the whole world is blind. And I had that on a t-shirt that I got, and that was a quote from our friend from India that Vineet knows very well. So Gandhi, that was his quote. So folding would be another way of dealing with conflict. Just give the other person what they want. What are the pros and cons of folding as a way of dealing with conflict? You want it here, take it. You build resentment. Thanks, Nirit. Thanks, Rod. The pro is you might make the other person feel good. You can move on, but you feel small. It allows yourself to consider the other point of view, Marissa. Yeah. You might think, oh, great, I'm going to give them something. You give up on your values. But if you're always giving up on your own values and what you want, you will build resentment over time. And that's when you're going to have passive aggressive behavior, because you're suppressing your self thank you and your needs, as Anna says. And sometimes if you really don't care about the issue, you could fold. So that could be strength in folding as well. Thank you, Diego. As I said, there's a time and place for all of these. And another way of dealing with conflict is 50-50 or compromise. Just cut those lemon in half. What are the pros and cons of compromise? You only get half. Thanks, Doris. Share sacrifice. You could feel defeated. Thanks, Lindsay. And Yurit. The problem with compromise is max 50-50 result, not always enough. Sense of partnership, true. So it might be better than the other ways. You feel better because you're getting something that, yet the pie could be bigger. So we use Amir, by the way, joined the call, my co-author and co-founder of Million Peacemakers. We have a book in Nonflict. We talk about the chefs fighting over one lemon, sorry. And one chef said, I had that lemon first and I need it and I'm going to use it. And he's holding on to the lemon. And the other chef said, no, I had that lemon first. It's mine. I need it for my recipe. And they're getting emotional. The knives are out. And the executive chef takes out his big knife, grabs the lemon, and he cuts it in half and says, okay, you take your half, and you, chef two, you take your half. And he looks at the first chef and he says, by the way, what do you need the lemon for? And he says, well, I need the juice for my recipe. And he looks at the other chef, well, what do you need the lemon for? Well, I need the zest for my recipe. Well, did you take the time to explain that to each other? If they did, they could have had all the juice and all the zest, 100%, instead of half the juice and half the zest. And that's a classic example of compromise. We're going to do a poll now, Laura, because I'm curious how people, if you had a go-to way of dealing with it, one go-to way, maybe not all the time, of dealing with it, what is your most commonly used way of dealing with conflict? Flee, force, fold, 50-50, or maybe another way?
I'm curious to know what is the other way.
No. Could be Nonflict. Could be.
It's for me.
Creative.
Okay.
All right, a few more people left to vote. Andrea says she's not getting the poll. Others negotiation. Okay, don't see a poll. Some people don't see that poll. Other people do, so I don't know why that would be the case. Sorry if you don't see the poll.
It's on your screen.
Should be on your screen. Maybe to play with the view that you have, because we have 86% of the folks voted, and I wonder if you could now share it. We've got 88% voting rate. So we've got 16% flee, equal amount force, equal amount fold, and the majority use compromise. The majority in this group use compromise, and then a quarter use another way. Yeah, okay, very interesting. When we did this, thanks, Maria, I'm glad you were able to vote. When we did this with a group of CEOs, I had 700 people in the room, and these were people that had the power in hiring and firing. About a third of them chose flee, admitted that they flee from conflict. And by the way we deal with conflict sets the tone for how other people in your organization, I know a lot of you are entrepreneurs, sets the tone for how other people deal with conflict. So if we're fleeing from conflict and walking on eggshells, probably a lot of people in your organization or your family are as well. Same thing, force, we set the tone. And about a third of the CEOs said that they use force to deal with conflict. Very few CEOs admit to using fold, but I'm sure a lot of them do. And again, another third say that they use compromise. So interesting results. Thank you. You could take the poll off, Laura.
It's done? Out?
Yep. Could remove that. Could close the poll. There we go. Now, which way we deal with conflict will, as I mentioned, there's a time and place, so it depends on the issue, how important the relationship is to you. So if it's an important relationship, you might want to consider there are more constructive ways of dealing with conflict. Who has more power or less, and how much time you have will also impact how you deal with conflict. If you have very little time, you might choose something that's quicker. So we did have that poll. Another question, which would be interesting for introspection. We talked about framing earlier. Part of our framing, how we view conflict and how we view the world, is impacted by our parents and what was their conflict resolution style and how we had conflict dealt with growing up. So in my case, my mother was a forcer. She would yell and scream and use force, and my father would fold. Okay, so that's how they dealt with conflict, and they were able to do it. If in growing up, if my mother would yell and scream at me and I wouldn't fold, I might get punished badly, and I would therefore maybe avoid conflict, and that's how it impacted me until I learned better tools. I would maybe avoid conflict until I explode, or maybe I would resent, and I would resent being told what to do as a result of being controlled, and therefore maybe push back hard if I felt that I was being controlled. So often there are control issues. So what I'd like to do is put up another poll, Laura. Poll number 2. Think about how conflict was dealt with at home, and are you using a similar way of dealing with conflict, fold, flee, force, 50-50, that your mother or father, or are you a combination of both of them, or are you doing the opposite and neither of what they are in reality? Some people say I will not be like my mother or my father, and sometimes they do the same anyway, or they are.
And this exercise is really very interesting, because the way the conflict was resolved at home many times is how you're resolving conflict throughout your life. So it's introspection on this is very important, not to fall into the same mistakes.
Who learn from their parents, who learn from their parents, who learn from their parents. Exactly.
So this means that if we can cut the cycle of conflict, we will have peace in the world, isn't it?
It sure is. Of negative conflict, yes, of negative. We like generational trauma. So there are a few people left to vote. And it's interesting. Okay, anyone left? So why don't we, because you and I didn't vote, Laura, why don't we close the poll and see how we ended up? So about 29% were like the mother, 12% like father, and majority have a bit of both, and 24% are neither. And we're going to be keeping these results over time and just seeing how it ends up. So thank you for sharing that. And that was a confidential. So those polls were confidential for your own use and just introspection. Here's an interesting quote. Often we do the opposite of this, don't we? We're often in a hurry to come up with the answer before we understand what the real problem is or what the real conflict is. This is same thing in business. If sales are down, that's a symptom. Why are sales down? Right? Take the time to understand the why. So why are we the way we are? Why we feel the way we do? And what we've been doing up until now is helping us understand why we might be the way we are and why we might feel the way we do when we have conflict. And thank you for sharing. Some people had autocratic parents and think of the impact it's had on you. And often when we're in conflict, we just act out based on how we were brought up and our triggers and our framing. And it's also helpful to think of our partner's framing, right? And wow, it's true. My mother-in-law, their mother is like that, and my husband's like that. And now I understand more of why he is or she is the way they are. So now we're going to get into Nonflict. And it's a simple, powerful 3-step process. The idea was we wanted something that we could use for any conflict, that we don't have to read the 950-page handbook on conflict. It's not academic, not for PhDs. Just for regular people. And I was honored to meet with Dr. Amir Kafir after he was introduced to me by the co-founder of the Peace Action Network, the chair at the time, Dick Simon. And Amir agreed to do this event for the YPO Canadian region back in 2012, which won Best of the Best international awards. And we trained 700 members and their spouses and their young adults. So it had great impact, and eventually I decided to leave my career in real estate to pursue this full-time, because I saw the impact it had in many lives, not only in YPOers, but we tried it in very difficult circumstances, emotional conflicts, identity-based conflicts. My wife and I went to a Palestinian refugee camp and practiced it with activist women, and I'm a Canadian Jew, and they started from being very hostile to me to being willing to make peace. So, and Nonflict combines theories that are already out there that have a lot of research behind them, such as positive psychology, imago, marriage therapy, change management, and coaching. And Amir is one of the leading form facilitators and coaches, and you got to share with him last week the power of form. Many of you were on that call last week that he led, and how you could use form in family. So the steps are the following. First step, and this, Einstein would be happy with this step, because the first step is to understand ourselves and our partner, right? Where we are going to share our view of the conflict. And the other one is mirror, the way you did before, where you mirror the essence of what was shared and reflect back what they heard. So I'm going to share my facts and feelings around the conflict. And then what is important to me, and the other person is going to listen actively, like you did earlier, and mirror the essence of what you heard, and then ask, do I understand you well, like we did with Laura before? But then ask, is there anything else? And often we're not even aware of that there was something else until we felt listened to and respected. And there's always something else, by the way, when it's an emotional conflict. So we're often starting with the symptom, and then, when I feel that you have an open heart to me, I can maybe then be more honest and open with what else there might be going on. Okay, and that's step one. And then we switch, and then the other person will share their facts and feelings and what's important to them, and we'll mirror it back. So we're taking the time to understand ourselves. And as someone mentioned in the breakout room, when you take the time to understand each other without interrupting, thank you, Marissa, for reminding us, without interrupting, we find that there's commonality. We find that we often want the same thing. We all want to feel respected and understood and safe. And that's everywhere in the world. That's why this works everywhere in the world, every culture. We all want the same thing. Now, step two, and we're going to discuss together. So we're no longer mirroring, we're having a discussion. Well, what's our real underlying conflict here? What's the real conflict versus the symptoms of the conflict? And the next is what's working well for us. We're going to discuss what's working well for us. What can we appreciate about the other person? Because often when we're in conflict, we're just thinking about the negative. They're so bad, or they're wrong. And what's working well? Be it at work, be it with your personal relationship. What's working well? What can we appreciate about the other person, even if we're just there, we're just willing to talk to each other right now?
Yeah, I think this is one of the key important things is to really always remember that there's things that are working well. So this is so important in marriages. Yes,
and this puts us in a better frame of mind to then go on to resolve it. And then the next question is, what's our worst case scenario if we can't resolve this? And how would that feel? We visualize facts and feelings. What's our worst case if we can't resolve it, and how would it feel? In a company, it might be that one of or both of us have to leave the company. Or if we're partners, it might lead to the company going down because people are taking sides. It's creating a lot of conflict. If we're the partners or the owners of the company or in a family business, same thing. What's the worst case scenario? Or in a geopolitical conflict, our kids go to war and my kid has to, be shot at, and vice versa by your kid. I mean, there are some places where that's the worst case scenario in our lives that we're living in. And how would it feel? It would probably feel pretty awful. This is from change management. Often you need a real or perceived crisis in order to take action toward change. But what you focus on gets done. And now we're going to focus on step 3, which is to co-create, where we're going to discuss together, well, what's our best case scenario and how would that feel? We're going to visualize, even close our eyes and visualize, if down the road this conflict were resolved, how would it feel? What's our best case? Deanna, thank you. Visualization is so important, so powerful. Our best case would be in a marriage that we bring out the best in each other. We allow each other to be the best versions we could be, such my wife is doing with me, because I couldn't be doing this without my wife. And at work, we enjoy working together. We co-create together. We do great things for our customers. We make impact in the world, such as UB Women are doing. Okay, what's our best case scenario? How would it feel? It would feel amazing, right? So now let's focus on that. And we say, okay, well, what are the obstacles to achieve that best case scenario? What's in the way of getting there? And we might write them down. We're going to discuss it together and write down all those obstacles that are in the way. So when I did this with a group of Palestinian and Israeli and Syrian and Jordanian students, we had a lot of obstacles, including their framing and their environment. It was a lot more obstacles than might be in a family. Then we look at the obstacles and we say, which of those obstacles could we control or influence? If it's out of our control, let's not bother with that. But what we can control, what could we do to overcome those controllable obstacles? And finally, an action plan. Okay, well, who's going to do what and when to overcome those controllable obstacles? So those are the 3 steps of Nonflict. And here's a question: what if one partner is not open to that kind of conversation? Does it only work if both parties want? And that's a great question, and we're going to get into all the questions that you have. But yes, you need 2 parties to come to the table. And this is a respectful process. One of the important aspects of this is you want to get permission first before you just engage, because if someone's so angry, you might want to have them calm down a little bit. And then before you just get into Nonflict, you're going to start by saying how you care about that person and the relationship is important, and you're just concerned and very upset that we're in conflict together. Would you be willing to try this process that we just learned to deal with our conflict? And you would choose a place that's neutral at a good time where you're not going to get interrupted, where you can actively listen to each other. All right. And another question is, what if they don't know the methodology? That's fine. You're all going to get cards and you could walk people through the methodology. Okay. And it's not yours. So it's a neutral way of dealing with conflict in a constructive way. So I'd like to demonstrate it. And I have a great volunteer who, with the power of Zoom, we could actually do this, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were in a workshop because she wouldn't travel with me. But my wife Naomi is over there, and we happen to have had a conflict on Saturday where we used Nonflict. So Naomi, come join. So everyone meet my wonderful wife Naomi.
Hi, everybody.
And this is the first. This is the first we're going to try. So you are you are seeing my wife and I. We're going to try recreate a little bit of what happened on Saturday during our walk together.
I won.
So a little bit of context. We like to walk together. We've been here about 9 weeks, and we haven't had too many conflicts. And we're obviously learned these tools, but everyone has conflict. Okay, so I have conflict. Everyone here has conflict, and luckily we had these tools. So what happened, Naomi?
We were walking around the lake,
And
we were enjoying ourselves, and we segued into a conversation about some construction, and you pulled out your phone and immediately went into Google Maps, and I lost it.
was that the first time I pulled out my phone during that walk or other walks?
No, you kind of are attached to your phone, but at that moment it became overwhelming for me, and I really wanted to focus on our walk, and there we were, stopped on technology while we were having in the middle of a conversation, and I was very emotional about wanting you to put your phone away. It's great using these adjectives now, but you can imagine it was a little stressful at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't,
And then how did I react?
You didn't like it much.
I didn't like it very much, having my phone pulled away. So I'm holding my phone like that. By the way, I don't know if Laura, you're still recording here, but I was holding my phone like that, looking at Google Maps. And I used to be in real estate, so I really like maps. Okay, I always like to know where I am. And I wanted to get my bearings around the lake to see where I am. And you literally put your hand and try to take away the phone. And that really pissed me off. And what did I say?
Something, I don't remember your exact words, but you said something like, go away.
Get your hand off and go away. Right. So I got emotional, and we were clearly angry. And you said, well, maybe I don't want to walk with you anymore. And I said, maybe we should try Nonflict. and that's what we did. So
I'm sorry, we just have to take a break here and say, Steve, whenever we have a disagreement of any kind, Steve's first words are, so if I understand you correctly, and he explains what just happened from his perspective of what he heard. And you know, I know we're going to have to solve this, and I may not always want to, but it always works. I just want to put that out there. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so in the heat of the moment, so some people might want to wait till it's not the heat of the moment, but because we've done this a bunch of times, we know that maybe it's good to deal with it then. And we both calmed down and said, okay, what's the conflict? What are my feelings here? And what's important to me? So for me, the conflict was, I like knowing where I am. I was curious where we were relative to the lake, and that was it. And when you tried to take away the phone, it made me feel very disrespected. And what was important to me is that I don't feel this, that I feel, respected. I'm not a kid. I'm not a 3-year-old you're taking away my toy.
Was there anything else?
You know what? Matter of fact, there is something else. My mother used to do that to me. My mother is very forceful, and if she didn't agree with something that I was doing, she would have her way and force me. She was forced to take it away from me or to make me stop. I don't need another mother, my wife. So it's important to me that we're peers and equals, and that you don't treat me like I'm a kid. Because I felt like I was being treated like a kid then.
So you felt by me reacting to having the phone out and doing what you felt was important at that moment, me trying to stop you, made you feel disrespected and that I was treating you like a kid.
Yes, you're right.
Anything else?
Well, I actually told you that. Is there anything else? Yes. It made me feel like you were treating me like a kid, and like it was my mother doing it. So that's it. No, that I already said was what the other thing was. So from your perspective, what were your facts and feelings at the time?
We were on our walk. We don't get, as surprising as it is, even though it's just the two of us for weeks and weeks and weeks, we don't get a lot of time together. We're both working all day. And so I was treasuring that small amount of time, and it was several times you had taken out your phone, and I felt disrespected because I wasn't part of the experience. You were escaping into where you are all day, and it just, what do I need to be there for? Not to have company on the walk. I can go by myself and our dogs.
Yeah. So if I understand you well, by me taking out the phone, I'm losing attention from you and our time together. And you felt disrespected and feel disrespected when I do that, because that's our quality time together. Time to connect and reconnect after a long day of work. Do I understand you well?
You do.
Is there anything else?
Well, I guess I have to question why I acted so emphatically at that moment, and what were my triggers and what made me so emotional. That's reflection afterwards. And I'm still trying to figure that out, but clearly there were some triggers there.
And not to get into it here necessarily, but I know Naomi's framing and her upbringing, and maybe things were triggered that maybe brought up memories of how you were treated as a kid the way I was as well, and maybe feeling disrespected as a trigger button of our upbringing. Mutual trigger button, right?
Could be.
Okay. So, and what's important to you is?
It's important to me that we communicate, that instead of being second fiddle to the phone, that we talk about it and value that time together.
Okay. It's important to me to have that quality time together too, to reconnect with you. And I find it de-stresses me. And often if we could talk about what's going on in our lives at work, or, with the kids and everything else, it's a great time to do that. And I value that.
Let's go for a walk. Oh, we're in the middle of a meeting.
So we just did step 1 of Nonflict, and now we're moving on to step 2. So we're going to discuss together what's our real underlying conflict here.
We weren't treating each other with respect.
Mm-hmm.
As we go together on a walk around the lake.
Great. I agree. That's the underlying conflict. We were both still, or I was still kind of engaged in my email land, and I wasn't really there with you fully.
And I jumped the gun on using my hand to cover your phone. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. So what's working well for us?
Well, we really still like each other. We like walking. We like being together.
The good thing is we're stuck.
At least for the next long while.
Yeah, it's working well for us. And we're having a lot of fun together. We're cooking together. We're creating stuff. We're connecting with each other and with families. And we're lucky that we have at least each other in this environment. Okay, it's working well. What's our worst case scenario if we couldn't resolve this conflict? And how would it feel?
I have to walk around the lake all the time by myself. That's lonely.
Yeah, so we would feel disconnected. We might resent each other a little more. They don't really understand it. They don't really care about me, or you don't care about me. I don't care about you. And it might be tougher to be living in this house together alone. And that would feel pretty awful. Okay, now let's move on to step 3, which is to co-create. What's our best case scenario? How would that feel?
We'd overcome this and we could avoid, so if I understand you correctly, happening too often.
Yeah, our best case is we feel really connected on our walk together. We bring out the best in each other. We brainstorm together different issues that we might have, and we feel really good and energized from the walk rather than pissed off at each other from the walk, right? And not want to be together. Yeah, that would be best case. We grow even closer as a couple. We grow from it.
I agree.
Awesome. Okay, we feel awesome. Great. What are the obstacles to achieve that best case?
Your phone and my eagerness.
Okay. Agreed. So, any other obstacles? Well, my schedule is an obstacle, but really we're already walking together, so I don't want to schedule an appointment during our walk. So the obstacles, can we control the phone and your eagerness?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay, so what could we do to overcome the controllable obstacle?
Well, we can talk about the need to use the phone or not use it on our walk, as long as we agree.
So communicate in advance that if we're expecting something important, that the other person knows about it and isn't surprised, and all of a sudden we keep reaching out for the phone, looking at a WhatsApp or an email or for an email or a phone call, right?
That will be very lovely.
And ideally, maybe not even have it on if there's nothing important we're expecting. I mean, will the world end if we were on airplane mode and shut our phones for an hour and a half?
We have to plug into that addiction. I completely agree. And I'm guilty too. I mean, don't think it's just Steve. Like, there's this temptation, like, oh, what if something came in? What if, someone wants to talk to me like now? I mean, okay, it can wait.
And Naomi is an entrepreneur. She's running a company and there's stuff going on, but an hour and a half probably won't, the business probably won't fail in an hour and a half during our walk, right? In either of our cases.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we try that?
Okay.
Okay, on our next walk, like
Let
later
you in
today.
on a secret. That's what we decided.
Great. So thank you, Naomi.
Well, thank you, Steve, for inviting me to participate and to meet all of you guys.
So, anyone have any questions? You could put that or comments, put them in the chat. And thanks again to my incredible wife. There's no way I could be doing what I'm doing now and running a nonprofit if not for Naomi's support. And you get a feel for how wonderful she is and how lucky I am.
The question is, did you decide to, how do you follow through the weeks and months regarding the cell phone issue? Because the cell phone is a third element in the marriage that is a problem of jealousy and respect. How do you
So what we decided is that we're going to try to do a daily walk where we do disconnect from our cell phone. And if we're expecting something urgent, so one of us might be in the middle of an important negotiation, we share that up front so we're not surprised. Okay, if we're looking occasionally at emails. So it's communication. It's all communication and respect and courtesy. And I know that my ideal reality is I'm going to get more from that walk without a phone than I will with a phone. Because if I'm with a phone, I'm going to be disengaged from my wife and from all the benefits of spending quality time together.
Yeah. And Andrea has a very good point here. She says, what about if people don't like to communicate? How do you deal with that?
Well, communication is a two-way street. So some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted. I think we as humans do have a need for communication, but we might be living alone, in which case there's no one to communicate with. But for most people, there is some form of communication required in life. I mean, as human social animals, we are social animals, and we might not always feel like communicating. We might feel at times we need to hibernate, we need to be introspective, we need to meditate, and that's great. Some people go on a week-long or 30-day meditation, and that's fine. But in reality, most of us at one point or another will have to then communicate with others. Right? And here's a tool to communicate effectively, which is respectful, because in every culture, right, and we talked about it earlier, in every culture, feeling respected is an important component, and feeling disrespected often causes conflict.
And it can happen that many times the other person doesn't know the methodology of Nonflict or doesn't remember, but even when one party knows it, you can lead on to go through the process, especially what is working well is magic.
Yeah, and the empathy that you get when you're in the other person's shoes, when they're sharing their perspective, we all have what's called mirror neurons, where we have empathy for what's going on, the other person's emotions, right? We go to a movie, when we used to go to a movie, or we watch a movie and someone has a pinprick, we might jump, or they eat something awful, we're gonna squirm. We all have those mirror neurons, we all have empathy. So if someone is sharing their emotions, we do have natural instinct to have empathy for the other. And I appreciate the comments and thanking Naomi for engaging with this. Conflict at work, I know a lot of you are entrepreneurs. 85% of employees do deal with conflict at work, and it does impact morale and productivity. The average employee spends 2.8 hours a week in conflict, and the average manager spends 25% of their time dealing with conflict. And now remotely, there are fewer tools to deal with it virtually, because the ideal way of dealing with conflict is certainly face-to-face, where you could get that body language, right? So now we have these tools, so we can still use Nonflict in dealing with conflict at work, and certainly active listening is a key, as Maria is reminding us, and it is easier said than done. That was the Palestinian activist woman who was very hostile to me at the beginning of our talk on being a Canadian Jew and not allowing giving them recognition at the UN. And she said, what did the Palestinians do against you Canadians? And by the end of going through Nonflict, she came and hugged Naomi, who was with me. We were on the other side of the wall, by the way, near Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem. And she thanked me for being a friend to the Palestinians, and said she was willing to make peace with with her Israeli Jewish neighbors, and that they together, power mothers would get, if we could get Obama, Netanyahu, and a bus in a room, we mothers will not let them out till there's a deal. And that's when I realized that I had in my hand the card that was created by Amir there, the steps of the Nonflict way. I had a gift to the world that I needed to share, and that's when I left my career in real estate development to do this full time, because if they were willing to sacrifice being accused of normalization and collaboration with the enemy for the sake of freedom, the least I could do is see what I could do, the impact I and others could have in sharing this to others. And we started Million Peacemakers with a vision of 1 million people co-creating a culture of peace in the world. Okay, wouldn't that be a cool thing? And our target market is those who desire peace. So our strategic position is for those who desire peace. Million Peacemakers enables global transformation by reframing conflict into non-conflict. So our target market is anyone who desires peace. And if someone doesn't desire peace, we're not going to try to change them. But most of the people in the world do desire peace. They just don't have the tools to do so. And that's why we give them the tools, which is the non-conflict way. So our book that came out in 2016, so just under 4 years ago, it was August. You and I did the book with the idea that it would be easy to read and easy to understand, and you're all going to, if you want, be able to send me an email and I'll get you either a PDF or a Kindle version or an Apple version of it. It got published into Marathi. Some of you are from India, Maharashtra province, where Mumbai is. I know one of our friends is from Mumbai. Abhijit Pawar is a great champion who took it on to, after working, after I'm doing work with this company, he said, let me see if I could create an impact and a legacy in my region, Maharashtra province, 100 million people. And he started with women, and he started this group called Tanishka Women who support each other in their lives using non-conflict, and then they choose a community-based conflict on how they could make it better, be it solving up pollution in rivers or lakes or streams or in the air, or women empowerment or violence against women. They take on projects and they become a political force, and they've impacted millions of people already in there. And then it was in Spanish. Amir worked with Danone Spain, and after training their executive team, they said, can we translate the book into Spanish so we could bring it down to lower levels of our employees who don't speak English? And we agreed. And then Penguin Random House took on the book in Spanish, and we made the cover of Cosmopolitan Spain after that. And it's in Hebrew, as you see over there. Amir is in Israel and wanted it in Hebrew. So the book is one tool that we have, and yes, that's because Laura's in the picture, I kept that picture, and that's at the Vatican last year, and that's Cardinal Turkson, who rumor has it might be the next Pope, and he was the one who led the session, the conference on religion and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we did then, Laura, by the way, inscribed the book in Spanish that we did give to the Pope, the Spanish version. Another way that we're looking to spread it is working virtually, given the world Alexa devices. There are now over 200 million devices in the world. And we're working with Amazon.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
She heard her name, sorry. And we're working with Amazon to code it and to put this workshop into the device. So if you're having a conflict, you could actually call on her to take you through the steps of non-conflict in case you don't have it in front of you. And it'll also give some of the aspects of the workshop. So it's in beta form now. I'm not sure if it'll work, but I'll just give you a quick version. Alexa, open the Nonflict Coach.
Welcome to the Nonflict Coach. I can help you learn various concepts of the Nonflict way. I can guide you through the process, or you can continue where you left off. How can I help?
Guide me.
I can help you practice on your own. Assist with two people in conflict. How would you like me to help?
With two people.
I can help you practice on your own. Assist with two people in conflict. How would you like me to help?
With two people.
This will walk you through the various steps of the Nonflict way by helping you work through a conflict with someone else. What is your name?
Stephen.
Yes or no? Is your name Stephen?
Yes.
What is your partner's name?
Laura.
What is your partner's name?
Laura. Didn't like Laura.
I guess my name is too difficult. Say
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah. Alexa exit. So it's in beta form now. It actually works more than it doesn't, but we're just getting out a few bugs, but that gives you an idea of what it'll be. And then it'll walk Laura and I through the steps of the Nonflict way. And it'll be ready to be released in a few weeks after our beta testers go through it. And so that's one tool that'll allow it to be spread to hundreds of millions. And then we're going to go to Google after that. So in summary, in summary, conflict, and by the way, it's not meant to replace people, but to support people in dealing with conflict. And we have live coaches who are trained as well. Laura is one of them around the world who could help people if they need, obviously, personal touch to deal with conflicts and to walk people through conflict. So in summary, conflict, if handled well, does support innovation and growth. People all want to feel respected, understood, safe, loved, and have hope for the future for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. That's universal. And if it's an important issue where relationship non-conflict could be something to be considered as a fifth way of dealing with conflict. So congratulations, you are now peacemakers. You have the tools. If you see my email over here, Hecht@millionpeacemakers.org. I think Laura will maybe send the contact information. Then just let me know if you would like a book, an electronic book. If you prefer a hard copy, it is available on Amazon. But we would be happy to get you a ebook. Either you tell me if you want a PDF of it or in Kindle format or an Apple format. It's an easy read, lots of stories. Amir and I share personal stories that help you understand it better, that you could maybe apply and relate to, like the one with Naomi and I. I don't know if you were able to relate to dealing with technology and interruptions from email and phones in your own lives. And the other thing now is to practice it. We've all been dealing with conflict all of our lives using either force or power or avoiding it. And if we practice a different way, then we could make it more part of our go-to way of dealing with conflict. So the key is then to practice it, and then when you're comfortable, to share it, because that's how we will spread a culture of peace in the world, if you practice it and then share it in your lives. So we urge you to be peacemakers and to use it in your own lives and then to share it with others, starting maybe with your family members and then go beyond your family to people you might work with or in your communities. And we'd be happy to engage with you on how it can be done and really support you in doing that. And we have a bunch of coaches and Laura to help encourage that, and Amir and others around the world. And Doris, I see, is on the call in Germany, and Rod is on the call, another coach in Guelph, Ontario. So we have a bunch of coaches on the call, and we have a wonderful group of people supporting that. And if you feel you could contribute to helping to spread this culture of peace in the world, please reach out. It's called Million Peacemakers. It's not Steve and Amir. It's everyone. We are all in this together. As someone mentioned earlier in the call, we're all in the same boat. And wouldn't it be really great if we could drive this boat through these rough seas in a way that, yes, we're going to be pushed around a little bit, but we end up coming to a destination where we're feeling more peaceful and united. And the world now is at a tipping point. We could go either way. We could get into our frightened mode of just protecting ourselves and our families and our communities and our countries, or we could see that, wow, we are in this boat together. This COVID thing is a threat to humanity. And if we don't work together in solving the problems such as climate change, I know you're working on climate change after, and we don't look at gender equality, and we don't look at the other issues that are out there, the other SDGs that the world has agreed to, and there's conflict in achieving any of them. Starting with inner peace, by the way, because if we don't have inner peace, we're not going to create external peace. So we could use this for our inner conflicts as well, going through my facts and feelings, what's important to me, and all the steps of non-conflict for inner conflict. Then we could really make an impact in our lives and our families and in our communities. And I thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Laura, so much for organizing this, for all of you for being here today. If any of you have any questions now, I'm happy to stay on and try and answer them as we go on. Anyone have any questions? Questions or comments? Thank you for.
I would suggest that we could maybe you can share more about a conflict in a company. Maybe one snippet of that. If there's no other question.
Okay. Well, a lot of us come from family businesses. I know when I was in India, I'm talking to an Indian friend, and I just did a seminar this week, a workshop this week for a family business association. And that becomes more complicated because you often have family conflicts and business conflicts, or values that come into conflict with each other. And often we find fathers and sons, or fathers and daughters having conflict, or mothers and daughters in the family business environment. And respect is often, the father might feel disrespected because of the hotshot child coming in trying to change things that they built, and the son or daughter feels disrespected by the father or mother, founder, or second generation or third generation, the one before them, because they're not letting them make the change. And going through Nonflict will often help them understand that they want the same thing. They want to have a harmonious family and a successful business. One tidbit that came out of, one piece of wisdom that came out of one of the workshops I did from someone who was a publisher of a newspaper whose father founded it, was he was avoiding the conflict, and he realized that the conflict is not going to go away when his father dies. It's only going to go away, it's going to stay there until he dies. He's going to live with it the rest of his life, long after his father is gone. So he decided not to avoid that conflict. Maria, you're raising your hand. I don't know if you wanted to say something or you had a question.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to share with you that I live here in Quito, Ecuador, South America, and maybe you have seen the news that during this crisis, COVID-19 crisis, one of our main cities has had a very, very heavy, way of, attack. Let's say the virus attacked the population in a very dramatic way, like New York, Milan, Madrid. So this is creating, of course, a lot of conflict between population, the government, the National Assembly, with the Congress, the legislature, and even though I happen to work with the vice president of the country, he has had a, let's say, a good speech to the people, getting people together and all that. But we are not used to Nonflict. We are very conflictive people. Always fighting a lot, not listening to each other. That's a big problem. So today, this morning, early today, I decided to make something crazy. Basically, I received a very interesting article about what Angela Merkel, from Germany, is proposing after the crisis, like to make a more green society. And basically, I sent it to the president of the Congress, and he thanked me. He knows I work with the vice president, but he says thank you. And I said, maybe I can prepare a document that could be useful for the executive and the legislature to work together, on something. And he said, I think it's a good idea. But I guess I'm going to use Nonflict, I hope it works, because I think we need, as a society, something, as you said, and I liked it, shared reality. Of course, the first step is fundamental, but then I found very, very important steps number 2 and number 3. Of course, this is not on a personal basis. This is on a country basis. I'm not sure if it will work, but I find your model of these steps 1, 2, 3 very useful, and hopefully, at least on something we can make it work. So I wanted to thank you, and I'm a peacemaker, so I hope I can be one of the 1 million peacemakers, or maybe 7 billion peacemakers, I hope, one day. Thank you.
Yes, Sarah, exactly what you're saying is so important, because one of the things is that when people understand this methodology that is quite simple to understand and to follow, actually you gain confidence. No matter your history or how you were brought up, you actually know that even though it's a very difficult situation, you know that it can come up to a positive outcome. And so that positivity actually already makes it there's less fear in any kind of conflict, because we'll all have conflict. So this is the beauty of this very simple methodology, that it brings up the best on everybody, and to step up, no matter how shy or where you are in the situation.
So thank you, Maria. By the way, I was in Quito and a few years ago, and then to Galapagos, which was the best vacation we ever had after that. I spent a few days in Quito first, so I've been there. And I've been to Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, where I got to understand the Latin and Central America way of dealing with conflict, which was very emotional. And the analogy or joke that was told to me by someone in El Salvador is that when someone has a baby, well, first the blood is very emotional or red. When someone has a baby, they don't, and they get a baby carriage, they never get to take out the baby carriage because it's too dangerous. So parts of the world there are very dangerous just to go out, which is unfortunate in that part of the world. But they were able to identify with it, and actually the wisdom I shared with you about the father and the son came from someone in your region. And step one is very important because it builds trust. Often we're in a hurry to get to the solution before there's trust built, especially in the tough conflicts, geopolitical conflicts. If you don't have trust, I don't care. It doesn't matter if the solution is brought on. It might be the best solution in the world, but it's not going to get implemented until we go through step one, where we take the time to understand ourselves and the other and listen to each other. And what's important to us, realize that we have a shared reality. So thank you for taking the risk and being a peacemaker.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, we are at the top of the hour. You have my coordinates. Happy to engage with you personally after this at any time. I've got a lot of time in my schedule. Used to do a lot of traveling, and now it's great because there's all this time that we didn't have before that we were spending in airports or different time zones or airplanes and hotels. And thank you, Maria. You're going to share it with your boss. Look forward to it. Please feel free to share it. You hear Zoe downstairs saying it's walk time,
Oh, thank you, everybody. So one of the key things about Be Women is that we believe in, when you hear something inspiring, you take out a pen and write something. So I invite you all, while I'll tell you briefly which are the next webinars, to write down what is it you're going to do today, now, to change based on what you heard today with Steve. What person are you going to either teach Nonflict or do Nonflict? And what specific issue you're going to deal with. So I really invite you to make that decision today, because only when you get inspired is when you really get action done. And you need to decide today in the next 5 minutes. So the next webinars we have daily webinars now. The next one is tomorrow, Time to Reflect Your Values, and is by author on Purpose Compass. There's a really great webinar. On May the 6th, we also have an amazing webinar about something that is very close to our hearts in Be Women. That is the author of The Caring Economy. And she will give us all, for the last 10 years, she's been studying specifically what is the caring economy. Her name is Raina Eisler. And we also have other webinars another one about the caring economy, that is a book written by Eve Rotsky, and she says caring starts at home, because if we as a society value care, we will always start at home, and we need to learn it at home. And so she's very adamant at giving tools of how to learn how to care for others at home, and then transport it into businesses, into your community, into your country maybe. And then we also have other webinars that are more connected with domestic violence. As you know, we really are working on helping through many ways to prevent and lower domestic violence that now has peaked in the last few months. And so we have somebody from the Femininity Foundation talking about the cost of violence in a country globally. It's the cost in monetary costs. It's huge. And so imagine if we could start to think how to prevent and use that money for other things other than violence. And so we have other amazing webinars coming up. So please write what you learned today. Decide 3 things or 1 thing that you're going to use this tool from today, because practice makes perfect. On this, I would like to thank Steve and everybody else who's been on the call and been so patient to hear this methodology that I'm so passionate about, and believe that that together, if everybody learns this very simple methodologies, we'll be reaching peace in a few years, isn't it, Steve? Maybe a few more years. And okay.
Well, start within ourselves. We could start right away.
Yes. So start with yourself. Start with your own conflict, and then make a point today of dealing with any conflict you've had with this methodology. I invite you. It's the most amazing way to reach to amazing relationships.
Great. And Laura, I'm thinking that maybe in a month from now, we're going to hold a workshop. I don't know if it'll be through Be Women if you're available, or for Million Peacemakers, that will do a couples workshop. So the way Naomi and I were here, we could actually take you through the steps. And if you have a partner, that we could actually do a practical workshop where we'll take you through steps, where you'll be in your own breakout rooms confidentially doing it, walking you through Nonflict, and they could also hear the workshop. So I'm just thinking we might try that. We might do one. Some of you mentioned conflicts at work. Maybe we'll do another one for you and your employees. So these are things that we're going to be looking to do in the near future. So when you send the email request for the book, I'll ask if you want to be notified of those workshops, in which case we'll just invite you to it.
Fantastic, Steve. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for your patience, and we'll see you in the next few days in the other webinars. Bye-bye.
Yana mentioned kids. We'll do it with kids too. Great idea. Thank you.